Welcome back. Principle number 5. Trade can make everyone better off. Chapter 3 talks a lot about trade, and so does Chapter 9. But here's the principle. Trade can involve money, it could involve goods, it could involve favors, it could involve services, all kinds of stuff. As long as two parties are involved, exchanging something, that is trade. What trade allows is each person can specialize in what they do best. So what I mean by that is, think about a lawn. Okay, I'm doing a lawn example again. And we've got two jobs. One is to weed the garden. The other is to mow the lawn. Okay? Each job will take 2 hours. Okay? Weeding the garden and mowing the lawn each takes 2 hours. And we have two people. Jack and Jane. Okay? Jack and Jane are our two people. They each can weed and they each can mow the lawn. However, Jane is better at mowing the lawn. She's stronger. She has more muscle tone. She can move that lawn more. So she can push that lawnmower faster than Jack can. Jack, he's good at mowing the lawn too. He's done it before. It's not that hard. But he is smaller. So he doesn't have a big height advantage. He also has better eye coordination. Okay, he plays racquetball a lot or tennis. So he can easily identify weeds quicker than Jane can. So he can move throughout the garden faster than Jane. And he doesn't have to stand up all the time and then sit back down because he's smaller. So this is what we would call specialization. Jane is better at mowing the lawn. Jack is better at weeding. So in 2 hours with two workers, Jane is going to specialize in the lawnmower and Jack is going to specialize in weeding. Now, if they both worked separately and they each did half and half, mathematically they would finish in 2 hours. But because one specializes in the other task, they will do it faster. Okay? So Jane will mow the lawn, let's say in an hour and a half. Instead of in 2 hours, Jane can mow the lawn in 1 hour and a half. And Jack, weeding, let's say it takes Jack 1 hour to weed because he's very fast. So Jack has 1 hour to weed. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is just insert a new slide here. So show you this thing. So Jack specializes in weeding. Jane specializes in mowing. Each working separately takes 2 hours. Working together through trading tasks, i.e. using their specialization, Jack equals 1 hour to weed garden. Jane equals 1.5 hours to mow lawn. Okay? Now, what happens here is magic. The magic of economics and specialization. Because Jack is done in an hour, Jack has 30 minutes to wait for Jane to be done with the lawn. Because he only takes 1 hour, she takes an hour and a half. So what Jack does is he helps Jane. Jack helps Jane for 30 minutes with clippings, debris disposal. So instead of Jane having to take the time to empty the garbage and debris and putting them in piles and all that stuff, Jack decides that I got 30 minutes left over. How about I help Jane out? Instead of sitting around waiting for Jane to finish, I'm going to use some of my minutes here and help her out. So Jack helps Jane and cuts the remaining time of 30 minutes in half. So therefore, through specialization and trading, the entire yard is done in 1 hour and 15 minutes. Okay? Because Jack takes some of his time and helps Jane, Jane doesn't even need to work for that hour and a half. Because that hour and a half with Jack's help equals 1 hour 15 minutes. Okay? So instead of working 2 hours separately, they specialize and trade their skills, and now they're done in 1 hour and 15 minutes instead of 1 hour and a half. Okay? Okay, number 6. Markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. This is where we talk a little bit about communist countries versus capitalist market economies. So, briefly, in a communist country, central planners, which are government agencies or bankers, decide how to allocate resources. In a communist country, they are government officials. Capitalist country, they are sometimes a different organization, such as a bank. So communist countries, they allocate the economy's scarce resources. So remember, we talk about scarcity in this class. So they decide, the government decides what goods and services are produced. So, for example, the government decides what color shirt should be produced. You don't get to decide as a consumer to say, hey, I like yellow shirts, I like purple shirts. Nope, the government decides what you will be able to buy. They decide how much is produced of each unit or of each product, and again, who produced and consumes them. So the government even says, hey, you over there with that factory, you have a clothing factory, I don't like you. I'm not going to allow you to produce clothing anymore. You need to give me your factory. Sometimes they'll pay the factory, sometimes they won't, but basically the government takes hold of that factory and gives it to someone they like. Hey, Bill, I just took over a clothing factory. I like you. Bill, run this factory for the government. Run this factory to produce clothing. Oh, and only produce yellow and purple shirts. Okay? That's communist country. Market economy. This is the United States. Okay? And we'll start getting into this in Chapter 2. But market economy allocates the resources. And what I mean by that is firms and households. Okay? I'll say that again. Firms and households. You need to get that absorbed into your brain just like opportunity cost. Firms and households are very important in this course and throughout all of your business courses. We're always talking about firms and households in the business core and in other courses. Even in science. I know some of you are in science and art. You might work for a firm someday. You might work for a graphic design firm someday. Or you might work for someone like Medtronic or Cargill as a scientist. And so you need to understand firms and households and how they interact. Okay? So firms, those are businesses. They decide what they want to produce, how much they want to produce, what price they should charge for it. Okay? The households are the ones that are you and me. We decide what we want to eat, how much we want to eat, based on how much we can afford, of course. But we decide how much we want to consume, what we want to wear, what kind of shirts we want to buy, what kind of shoes, makeup, all those kinds of things we decide. The government does not tell us what to wear or what to eat. Okay. And firms and households working together determine price. So the government does not come in and say, hey, t-shirts are automatically $20. Nope. It's the households and firms that decide what's a fair price to pay for a t-shirt. Okay. This leads me into the section on Adam Smith's invisible hand. Okay, so from your reading, the book talked a little bit about Adam Smith. His principle, noting that households and firms interacting in the market, they act as if they are guided by an invisible hand. What this means is there's just this force in the marketplace that leads them to make desirable market decisions. So what that means is, think back to our principle, rational people think at the margin. You like hamburgers because they have protein and carbs, and you can throw some onions on them and lettuce, right? And those are, good for you and all that. So why would you ever buy poison? You wouldn't buy poison, a bottle of poison or something like that. So what this means is because you as a customer want what's best for yourself, buying a hamburger, instead of something unhealthy or illegal, a firm does the same thing. They want to produce a good that a customer, a household will purchase. Firms do not produce stupid products. They might look stupid to you, but sometimes people out there do buy those products, like special kitchen gadgets or things that break, like the snake hose that shrinks, the outdoor hose that you might have seen on an infomercial that shrinks when there's no water in it. But then when it's full, it expands and then starts leaking. Well, some people thought that product was a good idea, but generally speaking, firms don't produce bad products that people won't want. Okay? Now, the opposite end of that, corollary, which means the opposite side of that, government intervention. So sometimes the government comes into the marketplace and puts a tax on a product. Or they put a regulation such as you cannot buy more than 2 bottles of cough medicine per month. Okay? It's illegal to do something like that. Or you have to get a prescription for a certain form of birth control. Okay? So you can't just go to the marketplace, go behind the counter and grab, birth control or, 10 bottles of cough syrup. You can't do that. So that helps or can help or hurt, the decisions of the households and firms. So if your family is really sick and you're the only one available to go to the market to buy cough syrup, you might have to go multiple times or to different stores or something like that in order to get an ample supply of cough syrup. The other hand, the government gives people mortgage rebates, deductions. So if you own a house, the government basically thanks you for owning your house, rewards you with a deduction on your taxes. Thousands of dollars of deduction for owning a house and paying the mortgage. Okay? So sometimes government intervention is good, sometimes it's bad, but generally speaking, in a capitalist society, which we're studying in this course, we believe in the invisible hand, that firms and households together are trying to make the best decisions for themselves and the market. Okay. Principle number 7. Governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. So as I just mentioned with the corollary of government intervention, this slide is somewhat of a repeat of what I just said, but we do need government. That is, we don't need anarchy. If we had anarchy, there would be The Walking Dead. Or it would be, what's those, I forgot those movies out there, the apocalypse type movies, where everybody's in it for themselves with no government enforcement, no police officers, no firefighters, no ambulances, all that kind of stuff. So there's 3 points here. Enforce rules and maintain. So police officers, they enforce property rights. You would never own a house. You would never go to the government or the bankers to buy a house only for your neighbor to come over and start putting his stuff on your property. Okay? What I mean is, let's say you own a nice house and your neighbor comes over and starts dumping garbage on your property or starts parking in your driveway without your permission. Well, that is illegal. It is trespassing, and in some cases, it's damaging of property. So we would call the police, and the police would come and remove the neighbor's property or fine him or arrest him. Okay, so sometimes the government's good because nobody would ever buy a house if they didn't have rights. Okay, if I bought a house but only somebody could come by and say, "Hey, I like that house. I'm going to take it. So this is my house now. I don't care that you paid the bank for it. It's my house now." In this society, that's illegal. Some other societies, not so sure. But there's two things here. Promoting efficiency. So the government sometimes can help us, improve the marketplace and be efficient. Other times, it promotes equality. Minimum wage laws, for example, are an effort to improve equality. It avoids disparities, so differences in the economic well-being of individuals and households and firms. Because sometimes the government can give money to companies called subsidies, and those subsidies can help the firm pay employees or give raises or open new factories. Two more points here. Property rights. So I just gave you an example of the actual property, but it's put essentially into geek speak. It's the ability of an individual to own and exercise control over scarce resources. So it could be a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One. That's your property. You have a right to it. You paid for it. You do not have to borrow it or allow your neighbors to use it or share it with anybody. It is your property. You own it. So if any of you have siblings out there that want to use your gaming systems, tell them it's your own rights. It's your property. You have property rights. You have the ability to exercise control over that property. Now, market failure is a situation in which the government gets involved because the market on its own, with its invisible hand, fails. Has a lack of efficient allocation of resources. So this is an example of where we do a minimum wage law, where we increase the minimum wage because inflation or prices of goods have gone up beyond the rate of labor wages. So somebody making $7.50 2 years ago was feeling okay. But now, 2 years later, when prices have gone up, someone making $7.50 is struggling to buy food for their family. So the government comes in and starts proposing maybe we should raise the wage rate to $10 because employers are not giving out wage raises fast enough. So the government comes in and says, hey, you must pay your workers $10 minimum now going forward.